Hello, everyone, and welcome to Quantum Ecosystem Conversations. My name is Dolly Chitta. On this series, we explore the people, technologies, investments, and policies shaping the future of quantum ecosystem. Earlier this year, we had the opportunity to discuss the growing importance of quantum policy with today's guest. Since then, the United States has taken another significant step with the release of Executive Order 14413, ushering in the next frontier of quantum innovation. This executive order represents one of the most comprehensive federal initiatives to date, outlining a coordinated national strategy that spans commercialization, manufacturing, workforce development, supply chains, national security, international partnerships, and scientific innovation. Today, we'll examine what this executive order means from a policy perspective, why it matters beyond the quantum community, and how it may shape the future of America's quantum ecosystem. I'm delighted to welcome back Troy Keller. Troy is a partner at Dorsey Whitney, where he advises clients at the intersection of technology, corporate strategy, international trade, and government policy. He has nearly 3 decades of experience in corporate governance, mergers, acquisitions, capital markets, and government affairs. And he has become a recognized voice on emerging technology policy, helping translate complex developments in quantum, AI, and innovation policy into practical insights for industry and policymakers alike. Hello, Troy. Welcome again to Quantum Ecosystem Conversations. Today's focus is on Executive Order 14413. Since our last conversation on quantum policy, Executive Order 14413 has been released. What do you see as the most significant policy shift introduced by this EO?
Dolly, hi. Thanks. Yeah, thanks again for having me on, and always super interesting discussions that the substance of which are frankly beyond me. But I enjoy talking about the surrounding, the policy, and the governmental side of it as an attorney. That's kind of where I live, and love being able to participate with people like you on important things that are moving forward. So, what's the change been? I think up to now, from a policy perspective, what the U.S. government has been focusing on has certainly been on the research side. And we talked about it a bit in our last discussion, how there needs to be a shift to the commercialization, and otherwise it'll always forever remain just a theoretical technology. And so this definitely is very specific. The 14413 has loads of specifics in it, and the accompanying executive order, the one on cryptography, also in cybersecurity that came out the same day, has several specifics to it too. So they're more specific and they're more about implementation. Like one of the big throws that this executive order is doing is trying to build a quantum computer that can actually be used for commercial solutions. To get to that threshold where we have one of those. Now, there's a lot more in the executive order than just that, but that's one of the key things. And you could explain better than me what exactly the significance of that would be. But again, it goes to commercialization rather than just research.
Yeah, I agree with you on that. Basically, starting off with having one functional quantum computer that would establish some advantage, but also there was significant emphasis on all the organizations and their coordination to work hand in hand, which leads to the second question. The executive order calls for a whole of government approach and requires coordination across agencies like Department of War, DOE, Department of Commerce, NASA, FBI, NSF, etc. Why is this level of coordination necessary for quantum technologies, you think?
Yeah, I think quantum is different. If you think about other technologies, for example, like gene editing, gene splicing technologies, most of those types of government approvals or involvement would come through the FDA, right? Because the applications are pretty clearly Food and Drug. Quantum is, of course, significant on the defense side. So, of course, we're going to have Department of War. It's significant for everything on the cybersecurity front. These applications can go into a number of areas. So once quantum gets there, it's going to be useful in chemistry and in pharmaceuticals and obviously in cybersecurity. And so that's where you've got other departments, Department of Commerce in particular, but other departments that need to be pulled in. So it's just, I think the nature of the technology is one that requires a full focused approach. Maybe another way to put that is if you think about comparing it to AI, which we do a lot, everybody does a lot, like how the AI technology development has happened and where the policy approach has been on that. The policy approach for AI, including in recent executive orders, has been about the government giving it space to continue to grow and operate and kind of stepping back, but only stepping in where it really needs to provide protection. Well, quantum is very different. Because it's so far off from the commercial viability, AI has tons of private capital being thrown at, growing fast. Quantum is very different. There's no one there aren't really customers for quantum technologies right now. And so the main customer is got to be the government. And so that's pulling in all these different groups to be the primary customer here at this early stage.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. It's interesting you said, what is the first customer? It is the government, because I think the immediate threat to having a quantum computer is basically related to national security as well, right? And which leads us to several other questions and the emphasis on the executive order, which is why, in contrast to AI, I suppose the government has to be a little bit more involved and not have too little guardrails around quantum. AI was different because they didn't want to have too much guardrails because it is going to impede innovation. But this will be quite opposite because of the national security issues. Great insight into that, Troy. So the executive order shifts from emphasis of research to commercialization, supply chains, manufacturing, and real-world quantum computer deployment. Do you see this as a transition from science policy to economic policy?
Yeah, I would actually, it will eventually be that, but I don't see that as the case just yet. I would say it's more a transition to supply chain technology. So we are, to build quantum computers, we need materials, clean room. We don't do very fast in the US anymore. We don't have access to on our own soil, and particularly when we talk about some of the critical minerals that are required to get to the fabrication of. So the supply chains, that comes up several times in the executive order, that different agencies in the government are being asked to go, and especially the Department of War, to figure out what we need on the supply chain front, and whether it's individual expertise or whether it's materials or whether it's the fabrication and the infrastructure development that we need for that. So I think that is where we are still. So we're beyond the research, but boy, we've got to have the supply chain. We got to be able to build things. We need the ability to do that in quantum, because of the technical precision and because of the specialty materials. We've got to identify where the gaps are in the supply chain that the U.S. with its allies can. I think we do see it as the economy piece of it, the customers, broader customers. That's going to come pretty quickly once we have solutions that are being developed, but we're not quite there yet.
I agree with you on the point that you mentioned. First of all, it rides on a parallel platform as our semiconductor wafer fabrication, and that we know it's a very complicated fabrication process. Texas Instruments and few other companies actually have large manufacturing facilities overseas in countries like China, and so we are trying to bring back that, but also the technical expertise. We need local workforce to be trained and developed for that. I think supply chains, securing that would be the number one for us, including the critical minerals that are used as part of these quantum chips as well. So one of the earliest implementation deadlines was actually given to Department of War to prioritize 3 quantum-based sensor projects within first 60 days. And that I thought was very specific. So what can you tell us about these specific government priorities, particularly related to national security?
A lot of it does come back to national security and the quantum sensing. I was actually heartened by that, because this executive order, obviously, it wasn't a quick write. We know they've been working on this for months, and I think going back well into 2025, and it was done with care and precision. So some of those dates, you see those, and your first instinct is, well, the White House is ordering this to happen. I sure hope they can get it done in time, especially when we come to things like quantum sensing, it's a little bit ahead of quantum, but still a bit away. This actually shows some confidence, right? And again, this wasn't just done on the back of a napkin. This was done over several months. I think this executive order is very special. Now, there are 260 something executive orders that President Trump has signed during this term, so we can't get too excited about any specific one. But this one's one of those that has clearly been months in the making. There's been collaboration with the different agencies. I think there's been collaboration in the private sector. And so specific dates that we see in this one, I am heartened by, because it shows some confidence that those timeframes are doable and feasible. And so, I'll put it, that's where kind of my viewpoint, I think, is useful in terms of what specifically they can do, what Department of War can do with that quantum sensing. That's to another type of expert. But I do think that the timeframes, from a policy perspective, you don't throw those out there if they're just going to be veiled, right? So I took heart in the fact that those dates are tangible and coming up. I found that super interesting, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of aggressive. And that also, again, ties back into the national security interest, right? And also, they talked about something called as QC-ADS, which is Quantum Computer for Application Development and Discovery Science. This is an initiative introduced by the executive order regarding supply chains, foundries, and quantum enabling technologies. Why are these ecosystem investments just as important as building quantum computers themselves?
Well, if I understood the question right, they lead to the quantum computers, right? We need the ecosystem. We need everything around it to build the quantum computers, but then so the quantum computers aren't sitting on an island, we have things to do with them. I like the time frame on that. What I found heartening was those are huge goals. Those aren't just, let's do this specific things, but that's one of those that is a bit more of a moonshot. To build something that does not exist right now, and that would have so many applications. However, there's no money right now that's been allocated to do that. There's a little bit of CHIPS money that can be used, a little bit of National Quantum Initiative money that's still left, but this would require far more than that, I would suppose. So I think what's going on here is that is a call to Congress to say, here is a very important initiative. We've laid out the groundwork for it. It's a relatively specific ask to build this supercomputer, and it's going to take a lot of money. Congress, you need to allocate some money. But as it stands right now, the executive order would not be enough authority, would not be able to provide the resources for that. So I think this is a bit of a call to Congress to provide some funding for it.
So going back to the previous question one more time, is they gave 60 days, which is 2 months runway for identifying 3 different quantum sensor projects. And of course, United States is leading in sensing and networking, while China is also leading in compute. So this looks very much near-fetched. However, my question to you is, why does a concerted national effort needs to be made to actually call out these projects? Like if you go to quantum companies, they already have their top 3 sensing projects, right? Why does this alignment need to happen on a national level? And does that pivot these companies, this ecosystem, to a different use case, which is called national security?
Yeah, I will just say, oftentimes the people in government, especially the White House, we've got kind of a tight team, and a lot of the advisors that are there come from the private sector. A lot of them split time and will be both private sector part of the time. Will also be providing some technology and technical advice. So it very well could be that what's happening here is that some of the private sector industry that have products that they think would be useful for this, that there's already been some collaboration, and that time frame that you just described is enough time to just kind of go out into the private sector and say, okay, yeah, what are some ones that would fit with the requirements we just put in the executive order? So think of it more as a dialogue than something that comes out of an ivory tower and says, this is what we want to happen. And now people go out and scour the private sector. These discussions happen as a dialogue over time and then get reflected ultimately in something like an executive order or even a piece of legislation ultimately.
So does that mean there was some initial funding that in collaboration with one of these government agencies that these quantum companies, as part of quantum benchmarking, QBI initiative, or the National Quantum Initiative, have worked towards? This has some predecessor.
It very well could. The money on the National Quantum Initiative hasn't been reauthorized yet, and so it kind of goes away here in a few years if it doesn't get reauthorized. I assume it will. I'm hopeful it will. But it was given some more funding during this last budgetary process. And so that funding included, whereas before it was only about setting up these quantum groups in universities and in a few states. now it has some of the money is set aside for commercial application. So it could be Dolly. I'm not behind the wall on those discussions, but it very well could be that money, especially the new funding, can now be used for that type of development. And so it wouldn't surprise me if it is.
Yeah. All right. Thank you for that. The executive order also emphasizes protecting quantum technologies while promoting collaboration with trusted allies. Now, the question is, what does, according to the government, trusted allies mean, and how should policymakers balance innovation, international collaboration, and then national security?
Yeah. So trusted allies, as we all know, especially technology like quantum, like some things a U.S. startup will have a breakthrough or some kind of innovation on a line of technology, and that all is accomplished here in the U.S. Great, but most foundational technologies are done globally. You've got sharing at the science level from university across university, and from country to country, and frankly, that's done globally, including countries like China that we see as kind of geopolitical competitors. This executive order, in my mind, is saying, okay, now a lot of that has been developing over many years. Now we're at the point where we've got to take these technologies and use them potentially defensively, and you saw again a little more of that in the companion Executive Order 144.2. So now's the time when we're trying to take this technology and do the next half step. It's not commercialization, but it's making sure that it's harnessed and that our defenses are hardened and that we've got what we need in order to protect the U.S. And so that is where the circle gets a little smaller. Whereas before it was global, now it's going to be a little smaller and include what they refer to as the trusted allies. I don't have a list of countries in front of me, but I think we all probably have a good sense for who those would be. And that just increases things like the supply. Even though the U.S. is big and powerful, we don't have everything we need to take the next step. And that includes, again, like we just talked about before, in most cases, supply chains. The difficulty there is for us to collaborate with some, but not everywhere, like again, just tighten the circle a little bit, requires kind of some standard setting, a fair amount of ongoing negotiation with those trusted allies, right, so that that they don't feel like they're being taken advantage, and things they develop they can use as they might want to use them on their side. So that's a fair amount of work to work through. And I think this was like on the funding, a call to an invitation to Congress to provide some funding. This here feels like a little bit of a reach out to allies and saying, let's open a channel and let's start discussing this. That one, as you noticed, did not have kind of the hard dates.
Yeah, specifically you mentioned 14412, right? That is the post-quantum cryptography related executive order. And I look at both of these as one is helping develop the quantum computer, and the other one is actually protecting against a quantum computer that the other executive order helps develop, because these two have to go hand in hand for the government, for sure. A government-wide quantum workforce strategy is also required. Beyond scientists and physicists, what talent and skills will be critical to building a successful quantum ecosystem, according to you, Troy?
Oh, man. Well, workforce development, and you need people who can build the fabs. You need technicians. You need skilled labor. And so one piece of I don't think everyone knows at this very moment how, you didn't see in the executive order like an inventory of, we've only got so many of these types of technicians, we're going to need 30% more of them. We don't know just yet what we need, right? And that's an opportunity for technical schools and states across the U.S. to sort of say, hey, yeah, we think you probably need more of this type of an engineer, or you need more of this type of clean room technician, people with this skill or that skill. And in our company, or our university, we actually have a program for that, because we've been partnering with, XYZ OEM manufacturer for many years. So we happen to have that specialty. We think you need that. There's going to be a fair amount of, that's where CISA, I think, comes in, fair amount of collaboration between government and the private sector, but also government, and probably more so government and localities like states and counties and universities, to see what we need and then what we have, and do that assessment, and then and then a later date provide some funding to increase the number of skilled laborers in those various areas.
Right. I am seeing this under Section 8, I believe, expanding and retaining the quantum workforce. In the Section A, they talk about actually the point that you mentioned is to come up with an audit of what are the quantum related occupations. They are there, which is step zero, right?
Yeah,
Identification
step zero.
of
Yeah.
step zero
Yeah.
occupations. And then
Uh,
I think it will come back to your question of how much more of this particular category. So it's probably step two of that. But this is, I think, having a 90-day deadline on that. So these are pretty aggressive deadlines, in my opinion,
yeah.
mandated to DOE, DOD, everybody
Yeah.
in place. So there is, going back to aggressive deadlines, tell us about the administration's sense of urgency and priorities.
Yeah, I think there are two lanes to think about this. The one's defensive, and one is more, so like you brought up well, like the AI example where AI, that's a competition. It's indirectly a security issue because if we are not as advanced as perhaps some of our adversaries in the world, then they can beat us both economically and then potentially militarily as well. Here, it's a little bit flipped. The very first priority is the defense part of it, and again because of the cybersecurity threat that quantum poses. So that is number one. But there's still the national interest in competition, the competitive, because if quantum does turn out to be, which I think many of us believe it will, such a critically important technology across the board, not just for national defense, but also economically, and for building these some miraculous drugs and materials and things that we can all benefit from in the future. So that's where the competitive piece of it comes out. So I think some of the timeframes that you saw in there are more about the competitiveness, but
Mhm.
other timeframes in there, particularly the quantum sensing, and then in 144.12 on just the hardening our defenses and being ready. I think those are more about straight up. We got to make sure the U.S. is ready and protected for a D-Day, for like something like a Y2K. And the difference, like Y2K, we all knew the date was. We all knew it was December 31, 1999, and so we all had something to work towards. Here, for all we know, Dolly, maybe somebody now has a quantum computer that can crack the codes. And if that's the case, then the day's already come. We're a little bit too late. But I think people feel like it's a few years out. I
Yeah,
do like how these dates are brought forward, I think, from what we
yeah.
saw under Biden. Yeah. So again, that shows the confidence. So a lot,
I agree
a
with
lot
you.
of
So
information. Yeah.
we did a post-quantum cryptography episode covering this exact thing, and the IBM and several others actually have advanced the date from 2030 of Curie to 2028. That means
Oh,
it just advanced to like 2 years from now. And
oh,
so
yeah.
the pretty scary situation, not knowing where the adversaries are with respect to the technology. And so, yeah, these align with the urgency at the national level. You have been part of several policy uh, strategies and also executive orders in the past regarding AI and several other technologies before. What
Yeah.
opportunities do executive orders like this create? And in particular, this one, 413 creates.
Like I said before, there have been 260 something executive orders in this administration, which already kind of surpasses the number from Trump's first administration, but not by much. But we still got a ways to go. So that's a lot of executive orders. Some are on the shorter side. Some are kind of quick, and we're going to do one thing, and so there's not a lot to them. But most are fairly complicated. So I say that because real work goes into them. They're developed over a long period of time,
Mm.
but we shouldn't get too excited about any particular one. Think that this is the Trump administration is all about quantum. They've had a team working on this. It's out there. There will be follow up. Everything in there is real, but we shouldn't also feel like this is the massive game changer, and then now Congress is going to send billions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars towards quantum. It's going to require a lot of continued effort, a lot of follow up
Mhm.
by people who care, like states and industry. They're going to have to take this executive order, go to the agency, and say, "Hey, we saw that you have this mandate. We know you're working on it. What help do you need? How can we help? How can we get involved?" And if you don't do that, some of these things may happen, but they may not be as impactful as they otherwise might be. If the industries that care don't go to Congress and say to their delegation and to others in Congress, "Hey, you know, this, for the fabs to be built, we need a lot more than the couple billion out of the CHIPS Act that's been directed towards quantum so far. We need a lot more than that. Can you run the bill? The White House called for it. It's right here. Can you run it? Because if you don't, because like I said, other executive orders have done similar things. There's a fintech one that a number of companies we work with are quite excited about, which is significant for that industry. Just a month or two ago, we've had the AI executive orders. We've had executive orders on pharmaceuticals and supply chains. It's just, and these are all very important, but 260 very important things. You've got to shout to get attention, even for something like this.
Yeah, the lobbying plays a role to actually promote the right technology and the entities. Now, states like Utah, how do you think they can contribute based upon you being part of our ecosystem building and the flywheel that we created here?
Yeah, great question. That one is really good because Utah has some advantages. It's very well coordinated, right? It's big enough to do big things, but it's small enough that people, especially in ecosystems, can get to know each other pretty well. So that's an advantage. It means the state can coordinate and do things. What we don't have is a quantum computer in the state. We don't have quantum companies based in the state. We have some great academic universities, so we have some potential, but in other ways we're kind of behind. So how does this executive order help us? But I would say that that workforce piece that we talked about before would be something that Utah could lean into. We've got a very good education system. We've got a good crop of students coming up through the chain, asking to be given options that can give them meaningful careers that will help shape the country and help shape the state. And right now, I guarantee you that very few of them are saying, what can I do on the quantum side, right? They don't know about it. So this is an opportunity for the state to come in and say to its workforce, hey, here's something you can do. Another area, though, that I want to call out is, of course, our great aerospace and defense sector. Utah has a very strong one that started many years ago when Hill Air Force Base started to the largest Air Force base in the country. We've got a great aerospace and defense sector that is built out around that. A lot of great companies, and not just big ones, like Northrop Grumman, but we've got a lot of small startups that are in the material space. And I think I would be very pleased if a number of them sort of looked at that executive order and said, okay, supply chain, I'm part of the aerospace supply chain. What do the things that I do, would they fit into any of these, whether it's applications that come out of it or materials that need to go into building the structures that can put together a quantum ecosystem. And I think if a lot of those companies start to put that question to themselves and in their boardroom discussions, I think Utah, that's an area where it can really lead. Frankly, we're not there right now, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. The space and defense and national security, NSA is also here. So I think that aligns with both of these executive orders. But also the workforce part, I wanted to bring one fact out about Utah. Utah is actually the currently youngest state in the nation, which means the 20 to 24-year-old, that age group folks are the maximum. So that can actually translate to training this workforce, at least half of it, towards quantum-related technologies, right? And so we have a significant advantage to leapfrog on that, in my opinion. I was talking to some high school students, and they were very eager to learn more about quantum after a 2-hour workshop I did. And so it just feels like the education system is not catching up as fast as our students are. And so this is right about time to introduce that and not wait for national level executive orders. I think we can do it round up as well, right? State level too. So with regards to milestones over the next 12 to 24 months with this executive orders, what do you think should be the intended goals and how realistic are they to achieve?
You've mentioned a number of the specific dates coming up, and I think we should treat those as milestones. What we can do is monitor, right? So one great thing about the American system is that these agencies don't tend to do things in a in a box somewhere, and it's hard to see what they're doing. These types of rulemaking, there's the audit that you described, there's the rule changes to federal acquisition regulations. We're going to see some of those things happen. Those will be publicly available to see, we should monitor that and watch, and that'll be a good sign as to how seriously the agencies are taking this, and it'll also give us, window into when we can jump in. Another thing I would look at, in to your very good question of what's going to happen over the next year, if Congress doesn't, if Congress does nothing, that's not a good sign that this is moving like it needs to move. So I think we should pay attention to that. There are a number of bills that would reauthorize the National Quantum Initiative, but also propose to do some other things to making the technology more commercially viable. And then we need money for some of the things that are called out for in the executive order. If that happens, I'll be very heartened and think and believe that this is getting some momentum, the momentum that it needs in the U.S. But if it doesn't, then a lot of the goals of the executive, 144.13 just won't be met if that money doesn't come in. So I think that's a key one for all of us to pay attention to.
Great. And how can we influence as a state? Is there a state level lobbying that could be done? Or generally, how does that process work to influence an executive order like this?
Yeah. So one would hope that, of course, the White House is sort of taking this. And I'm aware there have been discussions with folks in Congress. The White House has said, okay, here's, let's make this a priority. Let's get this to happen. But for states that care, that you have an interest, or just, generally want to see it come together, then the state themselves can certainly talk to their delegation and say, hey, we got 2 senators, and Utah, we've got 4 members of the House of Representatives, along with 2 senators. Let's talk to all of them and sort of show this executive order, say, look, this is a priority for our state. And those types of discussions are very powerful when the strength of numbers, when it's more than just 1 or 2 people, when you can say, look, here are all the people, here are all the companies and the universities, like some of the groups that you have organized, Dolly, over the last couple of years in Utah. You have people from the universities, you have people from the state government, you have people from the counties, you have people from the companies, of course. You have investors, private equity. If you can have a group that's like across the board, goes to the delegation, says this is important, and we represent all these different groups in the state, that'll immediately right there become a priority for the delegation. So because they're individuals, they can't know everything. They depend on their constituents to help show them what's important, and that type of group would show that it's clearly very important.
And to that extent, we have been doing such a fabulous job within the state, I think, laying that foundation for that advisory task force. Also, if there is the executive order for the state, does that need to align with the national executive order, or can it be a state-specific executive order on quantum?
So, you mean like if the state puts together a strategy and and whether it's the governor that promulgates that, or some type of piece of legislation from the so that is a state can do whatever it wants. It doesn't have to align. I know it would be smart to align in some way, in some respects, so we can take advantage of things that are happening nationally. But each state brings its own strengths, and so it should lean into those. And so Utah has its own strengths, and it should look at those and push forward. It can look far ahead and say, where's the commercialization going to happen here in decades? Or it can look short term and say, let's create a new program for fabrication in one of our universities. It's got all the options are on the table.
Is there anything else that you believe is still missing from this overall strategy?
I hate to keep coming back to it, but money, right? Put your money where your mouth is, and we really have not put a ton of money at the federal level into quantum so far. It's been single-digit billions, a little bit more than that, and that's certainly a lot of money. But when you compare it to, for example, the hundreds of billions, trillions that are going into other technologies like artificial intelligence, it's just a drop in the bucket. And so I think if we view it as important as we say we do, then I think more money needs to flow, and that again comes back to Congress, but also the White House putting more energy behind it. And so we'll see how it goes.
Any final words, Troy?
I think we've covered a lot of good things. I'm very excited about these executive orders, and I know you are as well. And I think that it shows that a lot of people have been working hard on this at different levels, and I love what we're doing at the local level too.
Great. So thank you so much for sharing your insights and helping us translate this important policy discussion into something that our audience can actually understand and appreciate. It's always a pleasure to have you on Quantum Ecosystem Conversations, Troy, and I look forward to continuing these conversations, including on the second executive order as it unfolds over the next couple of months. So thank you again, and see you on the next one.
Thanks, Dolly. Yeah, I look forward to it. Okay, we'll see you.
Thank you. Quantum technologies will help shape the future, but it's the decisions we make today in policy, investment, and education that will determine who leads that future. Today's discussion focused on the policy vision outlined in Executive Order 14413 and what it could mean for the future of quantum ecosystem. But this conversation doesn't end here. In our next episodes, we'll hear directly from the leaders across quantum industry who may have contributed to the drafting of the executive order, and also companies, researchers, and technology innovators to understand how they interpret this particular executive order, what opportunities this EO creates, and what challenges remain as the nation moves from policy to implementation. We'll also turn our attention to Executive Order 14412, exploring its implications for cybersecurity, the transition to PQC, and how organizations can begin preparing for the quantum era. Our goal at Quantum Ecosystem Conversations is to bring together diverse perspectives from government, university, industry, startups, investors, and policymakers to better understand the technologies, policies, and partnerships shaping the future of quantum. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, my name is Dolly Chitta.